On the surface, Nioh looks like your typical Dark Souls clone, and while it certainly makes no secret of its obvious inspirations, there's so much more to this samurai-themed adventure once you dig a little deeper. From its fast-paced action to its narrative steeped in Japanese culture, Nioh carves out a personality that is all its own. Set in feudal Japan, Nioh is a loose adaptation of Japanese history that focuses on the exploits of an Englishman named William, who travels to Japan in search of an alchemist who has stolen great power from him. This search leads him to the center of a civil war, a war that's being influenced by William's alchemist target and his ability to summon demons to serve him. That would be where the loose part of this adaptation comes in. The only way for William to regain his lost power is to join the war effort and put an end to his enemy's demonic plot. Nioh's narrative mix of fantasy and history is strangely compelling, as this bizarre combination manages to create more levity than many of Nioh's peers aim for. Despite this, Nioh still manages to deliver some horrifying and intense moments, which stand out that much more thanks to the game's willingness to play into the inherent silliness of its core concept, i.e., history, but with magic and demons. In terms of the actual story, I found it entertaining enough, mostly due to the cast of real-world characters who not only inform the more interesting Civil War side of the narrative, but end up feeling more fleshed out than William thanks to various flashbacks that provide some depth. In addition to these visually striking flashbacks, these characters are brought to life through spirited voice work that stands in stark contrast to that of our less engaging protagonist. As a result, William's entire journey feels underdeveloped alongside the historic fantasy backdrop. When you put all the components together though, Nioh's story ends up as some weird and wonderful window dressing for the game's main draw, its deep and varied combat. Fans of the Dark Souls series, or any of the games they inspired, will find much of Nioh's base elements familiar right out of the gate, but there's more to the samurai action than meets the eye. From its larger focus on stamina management to its huge variety of offensive techniques, Nioh satisfyingly branches out from its Souls roots to provide a fast-paced, action-focused take on the tried-and-true formula. Nioh's basics work in a comparable fashion to the games that very clearly inspired it. Guarding and dodging attacks while determining the safest time to strike back is about as calculated as it is in any Souls game, though Nioh makes plenty of additions to this formula that shift the focus from slow and methodical exchanges to faster, more action game-like encounters. A lot of this is thanks to Nioh's ki system, which puts a higher level of emphasis on managing your stamina, or ki. Your ki meter dictates what actions you can take, whether that be dodging, blocking, or attacking, and while this is present in many other games as a stamina meter, Nioh features a unique ability that turns the usual approach to stamina management on its head. While most games simply encourage you to watch your energy and punish you for overextending yourself, Nioh introduces the ki pulse, a feature that allows you to recharge your ki with a well-timed button press. Essentially, this pushes you to stay on the offensive by not only giving players a way to recharge their energy, but also tying a number of other elements to a well-timed pulse as well. For example, certain enemies can produce an area of effect spell known as a yokai realm. When a yokai realm is in effect, players' ki will regenerate more slowly while also boosting the enemy's energy regeneration. A perfect pulse will dispel this effect, allowing you to regain ki as usual, while also making the fight a little more manageable. Adding to the importance of stamina management is the fact that running out of ki will leave you stun-locked and open to a vicious critical attack. So while the ability to regenerate stamina may seem overpowered at first, getting greedy and overextending yourself can lead to severe punishment. But it's not as if Nioh doesn't give players plenty of tools to avoid these harsh punishments. The game provides you with a small range of unique weapons that each features 3 distinct movesets, plus a skill tree full of unlockable moves and abilities. In short, Nioh gives you plenty of ways to tailor your playstyle to any situation. The movesets come in the form of a powerful high stance, a well-rounded medium stance, and a speedy low stance. Learning not only their specific combos, but also the trade-offs you make by switching between them adds extra depth to the already nuanced combat. The relative ease of changing stances mid-battle also manages to make each encounter satisfying to adapt to on the fly. As I mentioned briefly, you also have access to skill trees for each weapon, plus a few that relate to extra abilities like ninjutsu and magic, putting a greater emphasis on buffing and debuffing mechanics in the process. Thankfully, using these weapons and abilities to their full potential is relatively easy, as Nioh's level up system is fairly easy to interpret, making it simple to know which stats you should improve for certain playstyles. But if the variety on offer isn't enough to keep the combat interesting, then the game even gives you what is essentially a super meter. By slaying enemies over time, you build up power for your guardian spirit, a being that can empower your weapon and grant you limited invincibility. Again, in this sort of game, having such a powerful ability on hand sounds too easy to abuse. Luckily, the ability builds up over so much time that you tend to not use it unless it's absolutely necessary. When you do use it, it feels ridiculously satisfying to go wild on an enemy, especially if it's a really tough one that's just beaten you over and over again. And you will be beaten over and over again. Such is the experience that comes with any Souls-like game, and for the most part you'll find your deaths will come at the hands of well-planned enemy placements that punish those who get in over their head. There's a few environmental traps to catch less attentive players off guard, but generally speaking your death is more likely to come in combat. Death at the hands of one of the game's many bosses is even more likely. Nioh's boss encounters live up to the lofty expectations set by many of Nioh's contemporaries, with a good mix of huge monstrosities and swift human-sized battles to take part in, and more often than not these fights are a good test of your dodging and key management skills. One of my few complaints with the game is that some of these bosses have ridiculously varied movesets and don't telegraph their attacks quite as much as you might hope. Death can come swiftly when an already tough boss whips out a new move you've never seen before, and to make matters worse, a bunch of these moves have very little wind-up. As with everything, you'll learn the subtle tells in vast movesets with practice, but initially, some of these bosses feel cheaper than they need to be. A few cheap shots aside, I really did enjoy the majority of Nioh's boss battles. A large part of what makes them so captivating is the cavalcade of unusual designs torn straight from Japanese mythology and history, from the horrific chimera known as the Nioh to the pitiable ogress. The captivating enemy designs span from the epic bosses all the way down the ranks to the more common yokai, and these more fantastic elements create a nice contrast against the grounded Japanese setting. The environments that this setting has to offer are surprisingly varied as well, from mountainside cave systems and villages to literal ninja mansions, and while plenty of these locations can come off as fairly generic, there are a few standout locations that spice up the proceedings well enough. Thankfully, whether we're talking about Nioh's more basic levels or its highlights, each level is exciting to explore, thanks to the sheer number of secrets, collectibles, and shortcuts that they house. Few things feel quite as rewarding as getting further and further from one of the game's limited checkpoints, only to circle back around and open up a less difficult path towards progression. Speaking of progression, Nioh makes moving forward in the story incredibly simple by making one big change to the Souls formula that it's borrowing from. Through the use of a world map, it's always easy to tell what you need to do next. While Nioh may lose a bit of the magic that comes with a big, interconnected world, the break between missions is appreciated, and gives players an easy way to monitor side missions or replay previously cleared levels. Honestly, with the amount of side missions on offer plus the ability to replay completed missions to find all the collectibles and get more Diablo-style loot, Nioh offers tons of content. That's without mentioning the game's multiplayer offerings, from its simple and quick cooperative mechanics to the Revenant system that pits you against NPC versions of fallen players. Even without all these side missions and features, the challenging single-player campaign should keep players busy for a decent stretch of time. Nioh is much more than just another Dark Souls clone. From its reworked mechanics that shift the focus to an aggressive action game style, to its off-kilter narrative combo of history and fantasy, Nioh is brimming with challenge and charm in equal measures. It borrows bits and pieces of a tried and true formula, while adding plenty of fresh elements to really carve out its own personality within the Souls-like subgenre.